Hello, people. How are you doing? Yes, once again, I'm here with you. It's your man. I know I've not done that video for quite some time, but it's because of I've been having some problems with YouTube and their regulations and so forth. But I'm back right now, and just ready to hit the comment section and ready to engage with yourselves. So yeah, please subscribe to my channel. It's the Diasporan African News Info Connect. That's the Diasporan African News Info Connect. Now today we're going to be speaking about people who are not conscious, black people who are not conscious, who pretend to be conscious. You often see them in vlogs, forums, on certain social media platforms, but they do not really understand the movement. The movement of the diaspora and connecting around the world, and the movement of being conscious and being a Pan African. So, basically, today we are gonna be talking about them, and let's just start off. I mean, the issue here is, there's basically, a lot of black people who just jump on the bandwagon because they see something going on. They don't really understand it, and these people are quite dangerous. They're quite dangerous to us, to us conscious ones who wanna prosper the blackness and the black community, and get us on the higher platter, and get us moving in the right direction. Because at the moment we're not. So we need a lot more conscious people. But there is, you know, these type of black people, you know, they are most probably indoctrinated by the churches, or most probably, go through other forms of, indoctrination from the Western world, which they're completely lost. They don't understand what being conscious is about, and you will often see them. And what it is, we have to really tackle these unconscious blacks and put them to the side, because at the moment they're causing a lot of problems. Most of them pretend to be conscious, um, you know, just to get views, and most of them, you know, most of them are probably in interracial marriages and interracial that business there, that business that doesn't help us blacks and doesn't help us to progress. So basically, we have to be careful of these people. um, you know they are the ones who will try and dismantle our movement, because they are very hard to come to the conscious side. They either don't want to come, they're arrogant, and they just want to jump on a bandwagon and cause distractions. One person which I've seen who's quite a prominent vlogger is the what's his name? Unapologetic Negropean. Now, these guys, right, listen, they're talking about, these unconscious guys are talking about, bringing interracial, that Western mentality to the continent. This interracial marriages and all this. Listen, we have to let these people know you've had your time. Yeah, you've chosen to take your route. You've made your bed, so sleep on your bed. Sleep where you've made your bed. Don't come and try and mess other people's bed up, or try and sleep in other people's bed when you've already made your bed. You've made your bed in the Western world. You want to follow that type of, white supremacy, imperialist regime of, pushing that agenda of interracial marriages. You want to follow that. So be there. Be in the Western world. Do not come to Africa and try and, force, push that bad narrative that, like, it's okay for them to be. What you're doing is making people more unconscious on the continent. You're making them more unconscious on the continent, and that needs to be stopped. Yeah, shame on them people who are trying to infiltrate, and trying to destroy us. We should have an eye on them and group up on them on these platforms. That's all I've got to say. Peace and love, brothers, and stay true to the ways of being conscious, being Pan African. Thank you.
Welcome back, and my guest is Professor Bani Pichana. We're talking about the life of Steve Biko, the teachings of Biko, and himself, by the way. He will talk about Steve Biko as if he was separate from the story, but he's as guilty as charged about this black consciousness thing. How would you explain it to somebody else? What are the elements, what is the essence of black consciousness?
I like to start with something that I really want to call imagination idealism. The idea of thinking yourself in a transcendent way beyond your current circumstances. And I say this because I say this today, is that we need to recapture that idealism, that sort of starry-eyed idea of a world that can be made and that it is possible to be made differently by us and nobody else. For me, that's where it begins. From there, it begins to say, if that is the case, then you have an agency. You are an agent for changing these things. As part of it is your responsibility. So that oppression isn't just what the other person does to you. And that's the real thing about Steve Biko. He was saying, we allow oppression to actually take hold of us. And until we actually take up the cudgels and bring an end to oppression by fighting it, we become agents of our own liberation. So he was then saying to black people, until you really take up the idea that you are your own liberators. And therefore things like fear and oppression, because at the end of the day, we allow the oppressor to do to us what in fact dehumanizes us. We must put a stop to that.
Well, that is my understanding, Prof. And I've taken a bit of flack for going along with that understanding, that it is not a case of being anti-something only, but it is more of being pro your own dignity, yourself, and extending the same to other people. And even teaching those who may dehumanize you that actually it's not the way to be, because the effort or act of dehumanizing you dehumanizes the very next person. Right. So if it's said by you, then I rest my case, because I agree with you. But you went to the UK anyway and studied for some time there, and I mentioned that you're a lawyer, you are a preacher, and you are an academic. You put all of these things together, and of course a force, you know, on your own. Tell me, how do you put all of these things together and the aspiration behind it?
Tim, you know, it was a circumstances, a natural progression. You know, when I qualified law, I'd done articles, I'd finished all the law degrees that came with it. And then when it was time to be admitted, the Minister of Justice at that time issued me with an order that kind of named me, those days it was called, you get named as a communist. The effect of that was that you were then, you were prevented from practicing as a lawyer. So the effect of that being named a communist by the Minister of Justice meant that my application for admission could not go through, couldn't in fact happen. And then I got a banning order, the effect of which was that I couldn't practice as an attorney, I couldn't set foot in a place of law, etc., etc. The result of that is in fact what got me to leave the country and go into exile. And I hadn't thought about that until that moment. And of course this was a year after Steve Biko was murdered, and there had been lots of people who were saying to me, you know, it's about time you get out of here.
You might be next.
Because you might be next. Yeah. And I really got that message eventually, so we left. And then we left and went to England. And in England, I, through then Bishop Desmond Tutu, who'd been the Bishop of Lesotho, went to King's College London, his old college, because he had managed to find a scholarship for me to go to King's. So I went to King's College London, read a degree in theology majoring in philosophy and systematic theology, and from there went to Oxford. And then I spent a couple of years both doing postgraduate studies in philosophy at King's College London, and then working as a parish priest in England, and then went to the World Council of Churches. It is in fact through working with the World Council of Churches that I was drawn back to South Africa. And I had been spending all that time being very active in the African National Congress, having begun by trying to rally together the black consciousness forces in exile, and soon recognized that this wasn't going to work. And therefore I made my way into being active in the African National Congress again, And those two things, both my studies, my activism in the anti-apartheid movement, African National Congress, as well as my work with the church, all of those things drew me to the World Council of Churches, which in turn drew me back to South Africa. And that came because Frank Chikane invited me to come back in 1990. And I didn't know, this was shortly after the speech by then President F.W. de Klerk to assist with the Rustenburg conference that took place that time. So it was Frank who invited me back. Once I was back for an extended period of 3 months, then I got different people saying, come back, come back, come back, come back. One of them was I then invited to the University of Cape Town, where in fact I came to teach at UCT. So things kind of came into place in a manner that I hadn't realized.
And then, of course, you got involved with the South African Human Rights Commission and got involved in different activities, as well as leading the UNISA, the university, for almost 10 years or thereabouts, as the Vice Chancellor. But now, and your formative years with Steve Biko, most of the stuff happened within a learning environment. And beyond what you were studying towards, you were learning other things and formulating ideas. When you look at education, the system today, what do you think is going on? Because to my mind, it does not seem that we're producing the kind of outcomes that should meet the challenges of our time.
It's a big challenge, Tim. It's just amazing. Since 1994, it must be said positively that the South African government and a successive president have put money and resources into education, including higher education, in a manner that is beyond what, in fact, we are getting in return. However, the biggest challenge, partly because we may well have underestimated the extent of the apartheid system that we were inheriting, the biggest challenge has been to really transform basic education from preschool to end of school. And the result of what we get out of that has been one of the most lamentable things, because it lacks depth, because it lacks...
Don't go away.